Thank you very much, everybody, for joining this evening. Tonight I'm going to be talking to you about some of my research areas. So I'm talking about healthy mind and healthy body, and the role of diet and exercise in healthy aging. Just a little bit of an introduction about me before I get into the main part of the lecture. So I'm currently head of school for biomedical, nutritional and sports sciences, which is one of the schools in the Faculty of Medical Sciences here at Newcastle University. I'm a professor of exercise science and nutrition, and I'm part of the Human Nutrition and Exercise Research Centre here at Newcastle as well. So I joined Newcastle University in 2015, and this was to set up the first sport and exercise science degree in medical sciences faculty in the UK. So it's been a fantastic opportunity to set up a whole new degree programme and to develop a whole new discipline area within medical sciences here at Newcastle. Just a little bit about my career journey. I know you're all kind of thinking about what you're going to be doing going to university and what you think you might be wanting to do for your future career. So I just thought I'd share sort of a little bit about my journey. So I did an undergraduate degree in sport and exercise science at Loughborough University, and I then went straight on to do my PhD following that. So sometimes people will go and do a master's degree after an undergraduate, but I was lucky to get a scholarship to go straight into my PhD, which is a 3-year research degree. And within that, I very much focused on nutrition and the application of nutrition in sport and exercise. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Following that, I then moved to Nottingham University, where I worked with industry partners, which was a really interesting experience. So looking at how nutrition and exercise influence our appetite regulation. I then moved up to the Northeast, which is home for me, to my first lecturing job at Northumbria University, which is across the road from us here in Newcastle. And as I said, moved to Newcastle in 2015 as a professor of sport and exercise science. So just a little bit about my my PhD. I'm just sort of setting the scene as to how I've got into the area of interest that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. So my research degree PhD was in sport and exercise nutrition, but specifically focusing on the impact of different carbohydrates on exercise performance and recovery. So I very much started looking at this in athletes and people who were training on a regular basis, competing, sometimes at the highest level in the sport that they played. But as I went through this PhD, I started to see that there was much more application than just looking at the work in high performance athletes, but also how we can help people to maintain exercise through good nutrition practices, and also how they can use exercise and nutrition for things like weight loss and appetite regulation. So I've ended up working in lots of different areas. I was just trying to depict a few of the areas of my interest on this slide. So as I said, working with athletes and looking at nutritional strategies, looking at the impact of nutrition on brain health, which I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight, working with people in terms of weight loss, and also working with older adults, again, which is my focus of tonight's lecture. But we've looked at lots of different nutritional strategies. We've done some work that's been very kind of controlled lab-based studies, as well as work in the community as well. Just to sort of let you understand a little bit more as well about what my job has entailed in the past, I've also been really lucky that I've been able to work as a consultant with lots of different sports clubs. So as much as I've been working in academia throughout my whole career, I've been able to take the research and the knowledge that we find within university research to then go and apply that into practice. So you can see that I've worked with some of the big football clubs in the region, but also had some really good experiences working with England women's football team, with British ice skating, England netball and British triathlon. And I think that's a really important message to understand, that the work that we do and the research that we do within universities, it's really important that we're able to apply that into real world practice. Okay, so to focus on what I'm going to talk about this evening in terms of this lecture, so I'm really focusing around healthy aging, and as I said, my early work focused on athletes and younger people, but what we do know is that we can take a lot of this knowledge and understanding within young people, within athletes, and apply this to how we can help our population to age better. So I'm really going to focus around two main areas of healthy aging. So the first around muscle health, and then talking about brain health and how nutrition and physical activity or exercise can really impact these two aspects of our health. So I'm going to talk about some of the background in the areas, a bit of the research, some of the research that we are doing or have done here at Newcastle, and then thinking about how we can then apply that research into recommendations for the public, and really start to hopefully try and help people to change their behaviours to help them to age better. So you're probably all aware that we are living in an aging population, and because of improvements in healthcare, in particular medicine, living conditions, people are living longer than they used to. So this set of graphs is the population pyramids for the UK in 1966, 2016, and then predicted for 2066. And you can see that shape is really changing across time, that the more people are going to be living longer in the future. So this means we have to really consider what we can do to ensure that when people are living longer, they're living healthily for longer, because it'll have massive, massive implications on our health care system if we have an older population who also then are very sort of unwell or have a lot of issues with their aging. So it's a big, big focus area in medical sciences across the world to think about how we can help to what things we can do within our lives to make sure that we age well. So there's lots of different definitions of healthy aging, but this is one that I really like from the World Health Organization, that defines healthy aging as the process of developing and maintaining the functional ability that enables well-being in older age. So what can we do to make sure that we can function well as we get older? So I think that's a really nice definition of healthy aging. So functional ability is about having the capability to enable people to do what they want to do and what people value. And I think I'm just trying to sort of set the scene in terms of your thinking for the future on this, because what healthy aging means to one person can be very, very different to what it could mean to another person. So we see some amazing stories about people in their 70s and 80s and older who are able to still run half marathons, etc. And a lot of people would consider that as being healthy aging. But actually, for some people, it's about being able to basically enjoy life and have reason to be able to do the things that they have reason to value. So these are some of the areas around healthy aging that are important. So being able to meet your own basic needs, to be able to make decisions, to stay mobile, to be able to have relationships and contribute to society. So there's lots and lots of different levels of what healthy aging may look like. And I think just moving forward, we always need to be mindful about diversity and inequity. So in different populations, in different communities, healthy aging is going to mean very different things to different people. So as I said, I'm going to focus on two main areas over the next sort of 35-40 minutes. The first is going to be around muscle health, and then the second around brain health. So let's start with muscle health. So why is muscle health important? And this is important to all of us throughout our life course. So we're talking about aging, but aging pretty much starts from the day that you're born. We're all aging every day. So please do not think of this as just something that is only important for older people. These are all things that we need to be mindful of throughout the life course. So, obviously skeletal muscle is required for movement. That's what enables our body to move and do the functions and perform that we do every day. Muscle has a very high metabolic rate, so it's really important for energy balance and to stop weight gain. So if you have a higher muscle mass, you have a higher metabolic rate, so that helps to maintain normal weight. Skeletal muscle is the primary site for insulin-stimulated glucose disposal. So this is what helps to maintain glycemic control. So to keep our blood glucose levels at about that kind of normal 4 to 5 millimoles per litre that we expect to see as kind of normal glycemic control. So skeletal muscle plays a massive part in glycemic control. And really importantly, skeletal muscle is the largest store of protein within the body. So it actually has a very, very important reserve of amino acids for the times that our body needs it. So at times of potential trauma or illness, if somebody is ill for a long time and is unable to eat properly, that's when we start to see muscle protein breakdown, because the body is using the protein that's stored in the muscle to survive. So muscle is absolutely central to many different health processes or health outcomes within the body. So this diagram is just to demonstrate that as we get older, we see muscle mass loss. And this is an absolutely normal part of standard sort of healthy aging, that we do see a decline in the amount of muscle mass that we have within our bodies. So the green line on this graph depicts the healthy sort of the standard decline in muscle mass with age that we see. But what we do know is that when we have periods of disuse, so times when we are not using our muscles to their full capacity or capability, you do see this much more rapid decline in muscle mass loss. And so as people get older, this is something that we need to be really, really mindful and careful about. So if older adults have times where they may be injured or have breakages or times of bed rest for illness, we can see this much more rapid, so this purple line, much more rapid decline in muscle mass loss over time, to the point where we call this the threshold of disability, where muscle mass loss gets so muscle mass gets so low that the individual is unable to look after themselves or care for themselves. So this is just to kind of demonstrate what happens with aging. So here we have, this is a sort of a cut through of the thigh muscle image. So this white dot in the middle here is the bone, and you see the dark area, which is the muscle, and then the subcutaneous fat around the muscle is the white bits. And with sort of aging with no exercise or intervention through nutrition and activity, what we see, this is an older muscle, you can see that the actual muscle size has declined rapidly. There's a much bigger fat mass around the muscle. And also you see this infiltration of fat into the muscle, so the white streaks within the muscle. So this can happen, but you can see that somebody who is age 60 or 70 who maintains activity and good nutrition could have a muscle that looks like this 25-year-old. So it is something that we can do something about through exercise and nutritional strategies. So preserving muscle mass and strength as we get older is absolutely critical aspect of aging well and aging with health and vitality. And we know that people who are inactive and have poor nutrition see a much more accelerated decline in their muscle mass and strength. So therefore, we really need to better understand this interaction between exercise, physical activity, and diet, so that we can make recommendations to people, we can keep them having the best sort of strength and muscle mass that they can have for as long as possible throughout the aging process. So this has been a huge focus of research across medicine for the last probably 10, 15 years. And in particular, protein, I'm going to talk a lot about protein over the next few slides, but protein intake in particular from the diet is absolutely essential to support adaptation and recovery following exercise. And this interaction between exercise, protein intake, and muscle mass and strength is what I'm going to focus on. So this diagram is just to demonstrate what happens within the muscle on a daily basis. So every day, all of us are going through this pattern of muscle protein breakdown and muscle protein synthesis. So every time we eat a meal and or exercise, that stimulates muscle protein synthesis. And then when we don't eat for a while or we're sedentary, the muscle starts to have it be a negative protein balance. So in theory, what we need to happen is for all these A sections to be bigger than the B sections across a day and across longer periods of time to stop muscle protein breakdown. So in this diagram, you can see that muscle protein breakdown is bigger than protein synthesis. So this is what leads to overall to the breakdown of muscle over time. So that's why meals that contain protein alongside exercise are absolutely essential to look at on a daily basis to make sure we can get these A sections bigger than the B sections every day. So as I said, this has been a big focus of research across a number of different institutions and countries, and to really look at how can we maximize what's the best thing we can do in terms of nutrition and exercise to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And as I said, a lot of this work started with looking at for athletes, so those who are best in the world at what they're doing, how can they really maximize the effects of their training through diet, and particularly looking at protein, when they take the protein, so the timing, the source of the protein that they're consuming, how much protein needs to be consumed, the pattern of protein intake. So is it something that's taken regularly, or is it on sort of little and often throughout the day, or big amounts at certain times of the day? And then there's been some really interesting research that I won't have time to go into tonight, but looking at co-ingestion of different nutrients with protein. So one example is omega-3 fatty acids has been very well studied and shows that it has a beneficial effect of consuming protein alongside omega-3 fatty acids to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So just a little bit about protein amount, because that's probably one of the biggest questions that we get asked is, if protein's important, how much protein should we be consuming on a daily basis? So we have our recommended daily intakes for the population, but these are not necessarily reflective of what we should be doing, given particularly people who are exercising on a regular basis, and then as you'll see with age change as well. So just to explain this graph a little bit, so this is some data from Ollie Whittard group, who are based now at King's College London. So this is looking at young men who were exercising, so doing some resistance exercise training within a gym setting, and then were given different doses of whey protein, so a milk protein, after the exercise session. And then they would take a sample of the muscle to be able to work out the rate of muscle protein synthesis that was happening within the muscle after that amount of protein has been taken. So really amazing science that they can, from a very small biopsy of a muscle, they can work out muscle protein synthesis across that whole, well, basically across the whole body. So you can quite clearly see here, as you increase the amount of protein given after exercise, you see this sort of linear effect of increased muscle protein synthesis. But in these young men, by giving them 20 grams of protein after exercise, and then giving them on another occasion 40 grams of protein after exercise, they saw no difference between the muscle protein synthetic rate. So this would suggest that in young people, around about 20 grams of protein after an exercise session is enough to try and maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis. But when exactly the same study was carried out in older men, you can see that the difference between 20 and 40 grams was in fact significant. So this shows that as we get older, we actually need more protein to have the same effect. So here in older adults after exercise, they saw an increase in muscle protein synthesis from 20 to 40 grams that wasn't seen in the younger adults. So actually this suggests to us that as we age, our protein requirements do actually change. And this is something that really isn't that well known across the general population. So there's a lot of work around types of proteins, and there's far too much to go into this evening, unfortunately. But just to say the main differences in proteins that have been studied have been looking at the difference between animal versus plant proteins. So animal proteins are things that we get from meat and from dairy products, eggs, etc., versus plant proteins such as soy protein, wheat, rice, potato, pea protein. So initially, most of the researchers focused around animal proteins, particularly dairy proteins, and whey protein is probably the highest, is definitely the highest used protein within nutrition. But there's much more research now looking at plant-based proteins, because lots of people choose not to eat animal proteins, and lots of research looking at different combinations of proteins. So looking at timing then, so some of you may use these practices if you're training on a regular basis. You may consume protein either before your exercise sessions or after your exercise sessions. But protein intake before exercise can be helpful, but the majority of the research is really focused on protein ingestion post-exercise. So when you can really stimulate muscle protein synthesis once you've had that stimulation from exercise as well. So that combination of exercise plus the protein after the exercise is thought to be ideal to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And more recently, there's been quite a bit of research looking at protein ingestion prior to sleep, because this has been seen as an extra time within the day that maybe we could get more protein into the diet. And so by consuming protein just before bedtime, that actually see this increase in overnight protein synthesis rates. And so in older adults, this is something that has been looked at quite a lot recently as potentially a really good intervention to help increase muscle protein synthesis. But certainly this opportunity after exercise is where we see the best effect. So it's called the anabolic window of opportunity. So after an exercise session, if you can get protein in through the diet as soon as possible, then that is going to really help in terms of muscle protein synthesis. So we know from research, and let's say a lot of it in younger people, but quite a lot more now in older adults as well, that this combination between exercise training, particularly resistance exercise training, with alongside some dietary protein will lead to greater hypertrophy, so increased muscle mass in both younger and older adults. And that has been shown to be better than just exercise alone. So it's a really important public health message to say, yes, we need to exercise and keep moving, but actually what you eat around that exercise is absolutely crucial as well to the outcomes that you can see. And as I said, what we have seen is this blunted anabolic response in older adults. So as I said, older adults are going to need more protein than younger, but this isn't reflected in our national recommendations for protein intake. So again, there's quite a lot of work to do around the education of the general public and what people understand around protein intake and exercise. So this is something we've thought about quite a lot here at Newcastle, and thinking we can do these really good lab-based research studies where you are in a controlled environment and you bring people into our laboratories, you do exercise sessions, you control what you feed people, you can take blood samples, you can take muscle samples and look at all these different outcomes. But what is really, really important in terms of public health and the health of our nation is thinking about how do we translate these findings from our research, our lab-based research, into our aging population? So how can we really get people to understand and be aware of what for them is the best thing that they can be doing from a lifestyle perspective to keep them as healthy as possible throughout the aging process? So this is just a little example of some research that we've led from Newcastle. So this was a study called Protein for Life, which was funded by our government research agencies. And this was really to try and better understand how we can increase protein intake in older adults in a community-based way. So this was a combination of research, but also talking to consumers and working with industry as well, which is really, really important, that we are able to work alongside industry partners in the research that we're doing so that we can help to develop new products, we can help to share the research findings that will then inform future developments. So we were really lucky to work with some fantastic industry partners on this project, some of which I'm sure you will recognise here. So this was a really interesting approach to combine work with industry, work with government, and also the consumers to really see if we could try and sort of, I guess, make sure that we're completing this education circle. And just a few little things that we found that I wanted to share with you. And I think these are some of the things that we really were quite shocked to find in our research. So we did quite a lot of talking to consumers and focus groups. And over 70% of the people that were involved in our studies were absolutely unaware of what their daily recommended protein intake was. They thought that protein was too expensive. Certainly for older people, they felt that protein filled them up too much and it wasn't something that they wanted to consume. And then things like the fact that a lot of protein sources are quite chewy or maybe difficult to digest puts people off consuming different protein sources. And then we had comments of things like don't like eating lots of meat. So people didn't really understand where else in their diet that they could get protein from other than from animal sources. And one of the quotes from one of the groups that we spoke to is here, just to kind of share the perception around protein was that older adults, so these were people in their probably, I think this was from 60s upwards, but some of them were saying things like these things are not for me. These are for kind of the young bodybuilders, and didn't understand how important protein was in their diet to maintain their health and mobility. So a huge amount to do in terms of actually getting people to understand the importance of this. So just to summarize that section then, so we do have really strong, good scientific evidence that demonstrates that resistance exercise and adequate protein intake can help to prevent loss of muscle mass and function in older adults. However, we really still don't understand this, so there's still lots and lots of work to do through medical sciences. So working with people from lots of different backgrounds to fully understand the importance of exercise and recovery from exercise in older adults and how we can really support this. But most importantly, I think, is to remember that we have to be really mindful of barriers and motivators that exist. So for lots of people, exercise is difficult. They don't maybe have access to the right equipment or to the right facilities. They don't feel confident in exercising. Never mind then trying to do the right thing around their nutrition, around that exercise as well. So we're trying to do a lot more now about going into communities, working with different socioeconomic status groups, working with different ethnic groups to try and better understand where these barriers are to exercise, where the motivating aspects are, so we can really try and design important interventions for different groups. Okay, so there's lots more that I could say about that, but I'm mindful of time, and I'm sure that we'll have some questions as well. So I'm going to move on to talk about brain health now. And this is an area that I've been very interested in over the last 4 or 5 years. And really coming from some of the work that we've done with younger people, younger adults and athletes, in terms of what can we do from a nutrition perspective to improve cognition? So thinking about reaction time, thinking about concentration, thinking about all these types of decision-making processes that for athletes in particular are absolutely fundamental to performance. But again, this all then relates into different aspects of life. So what are the things that we need to be good at as we age? We still need to maintain good cognitive performance, decision making, and so reaction times are just as important, but from a different perspective. So we've been doing quite a bit of work around how nutrition, and a little bit about physical activity, but I'm going to talk more about nutrition for this bit, about how nutrition impacts brain health throughout the aging process. And why is this important? Well, obviously, the human brain is absolutely central to everything that we do. So it's the command center for the nervous system, and it basically enables all our movements, our memory, our focus, our emotions. Everything that we do on a daily basis is controlled by our brain. So absolutely fundamentally is that, maintaining a healthy brain is what is going to be most important in terms of pursuing health and longevity. So we used to say things around healthy body, healthy mind, but actually it's probably healthy mind, healthy body is the way to look at it. And this statement here in bold is a definition of brain health, because sometimes people find brain health quite a difficult concept to understand. So brain health is the preservation of optimal brain integrity and mental and cognitive function at a given age. And this is in the absence of overt brain diseases. So we know that there are a lot of brain diseases and they're increasing. And I think if people were on this mini med school last week, you may have heard about some of the brain disorders that happen with aging. So this is about maintaining brain health before brain diseases are present. And one of the things that we really struggle with in research and talking about brain health is actually this is a really difficult thing to measure. So as scientists, we like to measure things, we like to see outcomes. So, obviously in the world that I work in, things like body weight is something that we can measure, or we can look at things like glycemic control in diabetes, or you can look at cholesterol levels, or those sorts of things that are quite easy to measure in individuals. But with brain health, it's very difficult to quantify. And there are lots of different aspects to the brain, which means that it's quite a challenging area to work in. So there's lots of different ways to assess brain health that maybe measure different things. So some of you may have actually been able to take part in some things where you've looked at things like cognitive tests, for example. We have questionnaires that we can use in research. And also with some amazing new developments in imaging techniques, so that people can actually look at the brain and look to see what's going on within the brain in real time. So these are just some examples of some cognitive tests. As I said, maybe some of you have done these sorts of things before. So the Stroop test is a very commonly used brain health tool. So here, where you have to say the color of the font, not what the word is saying. So it's actually quite difficult if you give that a go. Things like digital span, so remembering series of numbers. This is a clock drawing test, so you can see the difference between people. So someone who's got a healthy brain to someone who has a brain disease or a brain disorder, that it's very difficult for them to do these quite simple tasks. And then these are other types of sort of movement of different balls across different pegs that, again, you may have done these sorts of cognitive tests. So they're just a few examples of things that are sometimes used within research. So these are all the factors that we know of that affect brain health. And there are some things that we absolutely just can't control. So obviously the genes that we inherit from our families, we're unable to control. And some of these biological aspects that we can't control. So some of the things that happens within our cells, the balance of different chemicals within our body, have big influences on our brain, but are out of our control, as I say. But more recently, there's been a lot more focus on the things that we can control and how early in life we need to start thinking about brain health to be able to try and make some of these factors really have an influence on our brains. So again, through environment, there's some things that we can't control here in terms of exposure, traumatic events. So we know that there's a lot of work now around things like concussion, but also things around other sort of violence, abuse, neglect. Socioeconomic status is a factor that affects brain health, but we've very much focused on these lifestyle aspects, so the effect of diet and exercise and sleep patterns as well, which is another really important research area. So this just depicts some of the areas that are focused on looking at nutrition and brain health. So a lot of the research is focused on looking at individual foods, individual nutrients, and the impact that they have on brain health. And some of the most common foods that you probably hear related to brain health are things around like blueberries are often related to brain health, omega-3, caffeine, green tea, different herbs and spices, so curcumin, for example. So lots of individual foods. But the reality is, as we know, we don't eat individual foods. We eat diets or mixed meals. So from a research perspective, there is a strong and growing evidence base that nutrition can have a massive impact on brain health throughout the whole life course. So this is from birth. But as I said, many of the studies that have been carried out focus on single nutrients or foods rather than actually looking at dietary patterns, which is what we do in real life. So looking at these kind of combined effects of nutrition and diet and other lifestyle factors is still a big area of research. So again, just to share some research that we've been doing at Newcastle. So this is looking at, this is funded from, so again, the main research councils that from our government within the UK to look at the impact of nutrition on healthy brain aging. And you can see that this is a very multidisciplinary group of academics, so people from all different backgrounds across medicine and medical sciences. So we have psychiatrists, we have brain scientists, we have nutritionists, psychologists, people working in public health, people working in epidemiology, who've all come together to be part of this consortium to try and better understand nutrition's impact on our brains. And we've worked with different universities across the country, but we're leading this consortium here from Newcastle. One of the things that we've done is it seems quite basic, but it's really important to basically try and understand what the public's perception is around brain health. And so we teamed up with colleagues from Queen's University in Belfast to do a large-scale survey around brain health to understand what the general population actually understand around brain health. So this was in adults that are aged over 40, and we had a lot of people that completed this. But just to say, we have to be very careful in how we interpret some of the results, because we found that most of the people that completed this survey actually were women and were white Caucasian. So it just demonstrates that sometimes research is not ethnically diverse or inclusive. But basically what this really told us was that people are not thinking about brain health throughout their life course until something bad happens. So until somebody starts to realize that they have maybe memory problems or other problems that are related to their brain, they don't think about brain health as something that is important in their lifestyle. So people are focused on other medical conditions such as obesity, diabetes, heart disease, but actually brain health is not on people's radars as something that is important, when actually it's one of the major issues in medical sciences is brain diseases. So one of the areas that we focused on is looking at Mediterranean diet. So some of you may be aware of this, but it's basically a dietary pattern that is very rich in fish, in vegetables, in fruit, and low in processed foods. And there's some really good evidence emerging that this type of dietary pattern is really beneficial for brain health. And what's really interesting about this is that Mediterranean diet is maybe not just about the types of foods, but also about the lifestyle and the way that people eat and the patterns that they have within their lifestyle. So if we think about dietary patterns within particularly the Mediterranean, where food is a big part of lifestyle, people living in maybe more relaxed areas of kind of nice warm climates, and lots of outdoor activities. All of these things actually will impact brain health, and not just the food that is being consumed. So just some final conclusions. So we've got some time for questions. So there's lots more that I could be talking about, but I just hope that you're getting some of the main messages here around the impact and the importance of physical activity and nutrition in healthy aging, and that actually now these preventative aspects are really, really important as part of medicine. So preventative medicine and understanding how to keep people healthier for longer rather than treatment of disease is a major focus moving forward. But as with everything, there's much more that we need to be doing in terms of research and thinking about how we can translate that research into meaningful advice and strategies. And as I've said a number of times, I think it's really important that as a population, we're aware that we're all very different, and that we'll have major diversity and also inequity even within the UK. So that does need to be considered when we're thinking about advice and strategies for older adults in particular, but across the life course. And as with many research areas across medical sciences, bringing people together from different disciplines is really important, and that we all need to learn from each other across our research and our practice to get the best outcomes for the health of our population. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope that you've learned something and that you've enjoyed it. I've got my contact details on there, so happy to if people want to get in touch, but I will stop sharing my screen so we can maybe take some questions.